Okay, so welcome back, everybody, and welcome if you are just joining us. Thank you for joining this session for LeapxFinance. I hope you were able to catch the earlier sessions. If not, don't worry. They will be available on demand, and you'll want to go back and watch them or rewatch them. I'm Laura Heritage. I'm going to be your moderator for this session. If you have questions, please use at the bottom of your screen. There's a Q&A. Please use the Q&A. If it's not up on your screen on the bottom, there is a more with the three dotted buttons. Sometimes the Q&A gets hidden under there, so you might want to use that as well. Otherwise, go ahead and chat. Right now, I am very excited to introduce this next session. I think this is an excellent session for banks and credit unions of all sizes. How do you turn your API chaos into compliance and clarity? And we're talking real world scenarios from real people who have done this. So I am so pleased to introduce Todd Lyon, and he is the VP of Engineering at Tab Bank. And with that, I will exit and leave it to you, Todd, and I will come back in at probably a minute or two left with any questions that we received. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Yeah, thank you, Laura. So as Laura mentioned, I'm Todd Lyon, VP Engineering Manager at Tab Bank. And I'm sure many of you have faced challenges with tech debt related to APIs in your organizations. I'm just going to share with you a little bit about our journey of turning API chaos into compliance clarity. So the basics of what we'll cover today, I'm going to go over what we inherited in terms of our legacy APIs, what we've done so far to modernize and stabilize, remaining challenges we currently face, our concerns, and spoiler alert, this is a lot of compliance and regulatory risk, as I'm sure you might have seen in previous sessions or we'll be seeing later today, and then what we plan to do about our concerns at Tab Bank. So our journey so far, just to share with all of you a little bit, I don't know how many of you have similar situations where kind of coming into the organization in the past, a lot of our APIs were developed by third-party contractors that were no longer with us. So we didn't have access to them to ask questions or anything like that. And unfortunately, there was not a lot of documentation or in many cases, no documentation to go off as well. So many of our legacy APIs were built in the MuleSoft platform, and this was largely unknown to our developers. So there's kind of their own development language, data weave within MuleSoft, and our developers were not familiar with, did not know this. It was not documented, and it was not managed. So with this, we didn't have versioning or consistent release management either. No API contracts. On the slides here, it says Open API Swagger was not enforced. The truth is it didn't exist. And no documentation or traceability. We also had a web of improperly designed APIs. I think there were some interpretations that were a little bit off by the previous teams. And again, this was a third-party vendor. There were a lot of unnecessary hops and redundant layers, as well as inconsistent design patterns. So in a past life as a consultant, I've seen this before, and this was manageable while things were internal. But once, as a bank, we began exposing APIs to the outside world and third-party partners, the risks and gaps we faced became unavoidable. Just to kind of look a little bit about, some of the challenges we faced and how we solved them. This is a little bit more on the technical side, but just kind of on the left side of your screen there, we had, this is for our applications. I think what we had was a misinterpretation of what the MuleSoft architecture, where we had multiple layers that were jammed between other systems. And kind of what we did is converted to what's on the left, where we have a standard system backend, credit microservices underneath, and then data abstraction layer on top of a database. And we migrated over to the Tyke gateway from MuleSoft. And anything externally exposed on our end goes through Tyke. On the right, we have an example of more of what is a service mesh, and kind of how we solved for that. But in general, what we did, migrating from MuleSoft to modern microservices and Tyke as our gateway, is we started by retiring legacy MuleSoft APIs. We tried to remove those hops, and that's kind of what I was just trying to show in that previous slide, extra unnecessary jumps between APIs. We established standards with open API specifications. So this ensured that we had accurate and consistent API contracts. We defined versioning policies to drive consistency and lifecycle management. So specifically, now we have the process in place for when we do upgrades, our older versions of APIs are still out there for people to connect to. So it's not we change something and it potentially breaks somebody else's connections. And then we started mapping API purposes, workflows, and system interactions to build transparency across our organization. So the remaining challenges we face can kind of be summarized as gaining visibility. We still have many legacy APIs without clear business context or documentation. We have architecture teams that need to understand and define the business purpose behind each API we have. So what it does, what problems they solve, why it exists. We're still looking to map it out and document all our APIs and create a current state. And then we'd like for architecture to propose to us a future state. So kind of take that current state, where is there redundancy, where are we kind of missing, kind of what we're actually trying to accomplish, or, where are we doing too much, right? Like where do we have too much bloat, too many unnecessary APIs? This discovery and documentation effort is a core responsibility of our solutions architecture team going into next year. And so we'll have them looking at that as we move forward. So kind of why this visibility matters now. Our concerns are obviously around compliance and regulatory risk. With the CFPB Section 1033 rule now clearly defined and moving toward enforcement. The Financial Data Exchange serves as the recognized standard-setting body defining how financial institutions will comply through standardized secure APIs. This is, we basically want to make sure that we have stuff properly documented for audit requirements and so forth moving forward. As part of this, SR 2114 model risk management guidance is something we've looked at as well. And I think something that Tyke has actually helped point out to us is that, together these frameworks, we kind of reviewed some of these actual stipulations. These frameworks demand full visibility into every API we have. So what data we're exposing, who it connects to, and how it's governed and monitored. I think the main takeaway here is our APIs are now compliance artifacts. So for all APIs, we're looking to be able to demonstrate and document what data our APIs expose, consumes, or transforms, what control validations and permissions are applied, when and how APIs have been changed, so the versioning history and approval logs, and where documentation lives, including the open API standards, as well as audit trails and governance records. So a lot of this seems like, stuff we should have anyway, but this is forcing us to go ahead and get ready with this information. So what we plan to do about this in order to meet these requirements, of course, I mentioned engaging solutions architecture to do a current state mapping and propose a future state API strategy. We want to make sure that we document our business purposes for each of these APIs as well. Not just have kind of like an API diagram, but actually what each endpoint does, what its purpose is, what it supports, what it connects to, as well as what data it transmits. We want to drive alignment across architecture, business, and development teams to reinforce this. So we want not just the business to kind of understand the purpose of these APIs, but also our development teams to kind of understand what each endpoint does and the underlying connection points and purpose of the data underneath. Um, we also want to enforce with our development teams API versioning discipline, make sure that we do not remove an older API version until we're sure that nobody's using it, and make sure that as we do upgrade to new versions, we still support our older API versions. We also want to make sure that we adhere to open API standards and have the appropriate documentation. Additionally, we want to build lightweight purpose-driven APIs. So as I mentioned previously, we came from kind of an infrastructure where we had a lot of extra bloat, unnecessary hops. In a lot of cases, we discovered APIs that weren't being used, or in some cases weren't being used for the appropriate reasons. And then we want to make sure as well that there's traceability of data flow and system interactions. So in general, this involves establishing governance and visibility frameworks for API ownership, change management and audit readiness for our releases, for our new versioning. And then we want to promote education and buy-in across teams, ensuring everyone understands why compliance, purpose, and design matter, and why these, kind of some of those stipulations I put out there matter to the developers. So our overall goal is to transform our APIs from technical assets into governed, observable, and compliant business capabilities. And of course, we want to make sure everything in our organization is clearly defined and understood. Do we have, I guess I can, from here, pass it back to Laura for any questions.
Hi. We've got a lot of questions here for you, Todd, because this is
Great.
this is right up everybody's alley, and I think this is the big one. I think this is the question that is on top of everybody's mind. There's two here actually in this one question. One, how did you start the initiative for change, and especially how did you get investment for it?
So I think kind of how we started the initiative, it was kind of self-fulfilling in some ways. As I mentioned with MuleSoft and kind of the new teams that um, we had some contracting teams that when I came in were no longer with us. So we didn't have the internal knowledge to do a lot of the things we needed to do with MuleSoft, which is what we were using. However, when we switched over to Tyke as our API gateway, we kind of knew what we wanted to do, and we had developers that knew Python, knew Java. We could build out underlying APIs and microservices. So what we did initially was started mapping out what was in use, tried to gain an understanding for our important business functions, and put together a plan for building out these new APIs to replace what was in MuleSoft. Um, in terms of the financial aspect of and the funding for this transformation, kind of maybe this is a little bit funny, but being honest, I think that was a driving force behind why we transitioned. Our bill with MuleSoft was very, very large. And so it was part of the initiative, or the way we sold it to the business, was cost savings. So yes, there's an initial upfront cost for the development work, but year over year, we'll be saving, I think in our case, it was, upwards of $500,000 per year that we'll be saving going forward by taking on this initiative.
Okay, very good. Okay, I'm going to try my best to get these questions to you in a comprehensive way. So kind of on the same lines of, get the initiative started. Another question came in is what's your strategy for, what is your strategy in establishing a governance framework?
So I think the the first thing here, kind of like I mentioned, is making sure we have an understanding of our current state and kind of a roadmap to our future state. And then along the way, and there is some work here, we do have, a change management officer that we'd be working with on this. But we kind of want to have a current state, a proposed future state. And I mentioned proposed because we don't want to just jump in everything without buy-in from the team. We want the team to understand what they're working on, what they're working towards. Um, but then also as we make updates going forward, we want it properly documented. In our case, we use Confluence, and we're kind of really pushing the idea that each set of API workflows is documented in Confluence. We have kind of like the purpose, what each of the endpoints do. We have links to Swagger documentation for the actual data that goes in and comes out. And then as versions come out, we want to publish those versions, not just in Swagger, but I actually want, at the very least, links to those into Confluence and maybe mention of what the changes were, right? And I'm kind of putting out there what I want. We also, like, as I mentioned, do have, kind of like our change management officer that I'm sure has his needs as well and where he needs it documented. But these are the things I'm looking for on the engineering side.
Okay. Very good. You got a thanks for that. And then the next thing here, and sorry if I butcher this, um, it's kind of long, Todd. So, okay, what are your challenges maintaining the in-house infrastructure to ensure SRE best practices? Moving away from iPaaS solutions, I assume, should involve creating the cloud on-premise infrastructure to deploy and host this microservices. Okay. And then part of that is how would your team measure cost benefits on that decision? Did
Okay.
that?
Yeah, I might have had a little trouble understanding parts of that. I think for sure, like, how do we make sure that we have the underlying infrastructure? I'm assuming from a DevOps perspective, to support what we're building. Uh, and then I guess maybe I don't know if there's a follow-up on that second part or if.
Yeah, it's like what, do you have any challenges of maintaining this infrastructure yourself? And what are some of your SRE best practices?
Um, so for sure we do have challenges maintaining some of this ourselves right now. It's kind of a separate problem, but perhaps in parallel. So this year, kind of within our organization, I've inherited DevOps as well. And we do have a lot of, legacy infrastructure as well, where we've got holes in documentation and so forth as well. So we're having to address that, entirely separately, spinning up new Kubernetes clusters, making sure we're on like the updated versions of that underlying infrastructure, making sure that we're using, as we build out on the API sides, as we're building out things, we're making sure we're using um, updated libraries and versions and complying with security standards within our organization. There is a cost to that as well. We do have some contractors and consultants that are coming in and helping with that. I think maybe just an important takeaway though is, as I mentioned, this problem would exist even without the API problem. So it's something we need to do anyway, just to get
Yeah.
modern and from a tech debt perspective. Um, I don't know. Hopefully that answered the majority of that question.
Yeah, and then is something similar is how do you have security concerns with exposing your Swagger docs to the wider audience via Confluence? Is there authentication in front of these? I mean,
There is, yeah. So we do not, like, when I mentioned Confluence, that is internal. So those are our internal links to the Swagger docs. The only thing we're exposing to the outside is anything that is going through our tight gateway that is consumable by the outside. And even in that case, you have to log in anyway, right? Like, so in that case, you would have to log in as a third party to our Tyke portal, and you can access it from there, right? So you'd have to be a vendor, and then you would only have access to, if you're familiar with Tyke, like in the catalogs, like only the APIs available to you to consume would you have access to the Swagger documentation for.
um, So similar along the line, so you are exposing your APIs. You have a Confluence page which lists details about your APIs, and then you also expose them externally, if to your business partners via the developer portal. One question, a follow-up question to that is, how is the API documentation organized in Confluence?
So I guess kind of what I was mentioning in Confluence, and this is kind of our internal database. So we have, this is in this case, our knowledge base is on-prem. It is a version of Confluence. We have within our organization, we're separated into different arts, so agile release trains. In those arts, they each own various code bases, applications, and APIs. And underneath each of those, we have basically for each application, we would have business architecture, system architecture, and infrastructure architecture pages within Confluence for our internal IT teams to reference. And then for the APIs specifically, we have kind of the purpose as to what this is. We kind of have a layer. Is it a backend? Is it a microservice? Is it a system layer or data abstraction layer? And then we have links to the Confluence, or excuse me, links to the Swagger for the actual API contracts, and then documentation related to any versioning. And we are still in certain arts, this is cleaner than others. In certain arts, this is something we're still building out as part of our journey as we move forward.
Great. And okay, one last, so another question is how will you measure the success of this transformation from tech assets to governed business capabilities? And do you have any, specific tangible indicators that you are able to demonstrate to the business? I mean, how do you gauge the success of this transformation? Obviously, you were able to save, like $500,000, right? That's success from a cost reduction standpoint, but you still need to be able to move your business needle forward for new opportunities, new business models that your business wants. So are you keeping track of, okay, yes, we got that big one, we saved the business this amount, but now we're able to do X, Y, and Z, and this is how we're tracking the benefit in innovation going forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. I believe the second big one is actually coming away from before we we're kind of in a situation where we did not have a lot of in-house knowledge or resources to do any API development within MuleSoft, right? I mean, we had a little bit, we had people that could work their way through it. But we do have, full Java and Python teams. And now what we have, is the capability to build out APIs and microservices very quickly. So that's already kind of turned into a big win for the business, and it's like some new initiatives. We've been able to move forward with some new initiatives rather than just focus on like the tech debt aspect of things. So that's been a big second win. But I guess going forward, I think maybe for our overall vision, how do we measure success? I think as we document out what we have, I think being able to share with the business, I think a lot of times, I mean, in IT in general, I'm sure the business feels like a lot of stuff is in a black box. But one thing we're really working towards with documenting out what we have and what we'd like to go towards is being able to explain and show it to the business in a way that they can understand, right? So, we actually have this system and we have underneath what's supporting it. This is the actual data that we're able to pull from, in our case, like our data lake, right? Like, so if you're wanting new reporting, like we can actually show you what we're getting, where it's coming from. And this is something we can't currently do. So I think that visibility is something else that's going to be a huge success for for the business going forward.
And currently, are you looking at the FDX APIs and eventually the 1033 regulation still stands, even though the rule is open, it is still law of the land. Are you, and the size of tab actually gives you some runway of when you need to implement that as well. But are you taking a look at financial data exchange?
Yes, I mean, I think right now we're still kind of in the early stages. I kind of shared where we're going, where we're at. I think kind of our next step, kind of I mentioned, is kind of that architectural roadmap of making sure we understand our current state and where we would like to go. And I think part of that, is going to involve discussions with the business, compliance, and so forth, and bringing up FDX. I do, something that we want to make sure that we do is that we have buy-in and understanding across the board as to why. I think that's something that was a little bit lost in previous teams we had here at Tab with some of the contractors. Like, I think it was just kind of they got a project, they went and did it, they didn't understand the why, and that was, so I think that communication and transparency is going to be key with that moving forward. But definitely would love to have and have been having some discussions with FDX.
Perfect. Perfect. Um, oh, got another one coming in. Um, what points did you evaluate to leave MuleSoft? Did you run a benchmark? Which are the most relevant?
I I think so. Cost was one of the large factors. I think kind of the lack of clarity based on our current teams and then teams we used to have. So as I mentioned, we had contracting teams, and that was their specialization was MuleSoft. We had application teams that over the past several years. So I've been with Tab for a little over 3 years now. I brought a team with me from past life as well, that was more in the realm of Python and Golang. We had Java developers on staff. And so like a lot of our application teams did not have that MuleSoft knowledge, but they did know APIs and microservices. So that was a key factor as well. But then also infrastructure wise, just kind of looking at the way we do things. I'm sure, many financial institutions still kind of have a hybrid infrastructure model. You're not entirely on cloud. And, just kind of the way that worked where we had some control of our stuff that was on prem, but with MuleSoft, we didn't feel we did. So that was another key factor. And kind of migrating out, we knew we wanted to be able to build APIs and microservices. Actually, the gateway was something we looked at next, and that's kind of where we synced up with Tyke. We did evaluate several others. Kong, I think with Kong, we had some trouble with Kubernetes, with having our Kubernetes infrastructure be compatible with Kong. And Tyke ultimately was what met our needs. So
Okay. And then another question is, are most of your APIs are REST, correct? You don't have, they were asking if you had any event-driven
GraphQL
APIs
uh,
or,
that is something we've explored. Our APIs are REST. All of our APIs are REST at this point. We have looked at eventing, using Solus, using Kafka. And then I guess we've also looked at GraphQL, more on the POC side. So we do
yeah.
have stuff that we're is not out there in the wild that we kind of do behind the scenes that we've played with. But
Okay. Well, you know what? The questions are still going to be coming in, but I believe we are at our time. Thank you so much. I think you're going to be a very popular man. Um, so this again will be available for replay, and reach out and connect and talk, and share your transformation journeys. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Todd.
thank you. And yes, please feel free to reach out and connect on LinkedIn. Any questions that didn't get answered. So.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.